Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Cabinet of the 21st of January. I'm Councillor Michael Jones, Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of the staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please note that there is a no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The Council is a data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the Council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery, should there be any, should be aware that by entering the chamber they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what's displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded in the webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand. To speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. We will now commence with apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Chair, we've had an apologies for lateness from Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Does any member have any disclosures of interest? Thank you. I don't see anyone indicating. Now we come to the minutes held on the 26th of November. Does the Cabinet agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting? Agree. Thank you. We have 15 minutes for public question time, but I won't go through the arrangements for that because there are no members of the public in attendance. Item 5, further notice of intention to conduct business in private, notifications of any representations. Please can I ask the interim monitoring officer to confirm if we have received any notifications?
No, we haven't, Chair.
Thank you. Matters referred to the Cabinet and any report from the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. As normal, Councillor Russell, welcome to the meeting, and I'll bring you in during each item which has been referred from the Commission. So we will start by considering the General Enforcement Policy Report, which was not referred to the OSC, and I will introduce it. I'm pleased to bring the updated enforcement policy back to Cabinet as it touches on other portfolio areas. I will be happy to bring in Councillors Khan and Hilton if they have anything to further add later in the discussion. But I'd start by saying this is a timely review. Our current policy was agreed by Cabinet as far back as in 2013 and is now somewhat outdated. It omits key legislation now. It uses prescriptive language like we will or we won't, and it doesn't allow officers to apply professional judgment. This creates uncertainty for officers and residents and exposes the council to legal challenge. It is important that we get this right because this is a policy that cuts across many different service areas, addressing fly tipping, littering, dog fouling and public space anti-social behaviour. It also covers what we do with our licensing enforcement for alcohol, gambling and animals, and indeed planning enforcement. With the upcoming third-party enforcement concession, our integrated enforcement approach targeting high harm offences such as fly tipping and following the discharge of water neutrality, a higher degree of planning applications which may require enforcements of conditions and associated frameworks for how demolitions and builds are managed, a modern policy that stands up to challenge is essential. And I would say, Cabinet, it comes not a moment too soon. Mobilisation of this new team cracking down on environmental crime will be happening, I'm advised, in a matter of weeks. Environmental crime, as set out in paragraph 5.2 of the Cabinet report, is getting worse across the country, and Crawley Borough, sadly, is no exception. Locally, Crawley recorded 1,906 incidents in the 12 months since comparable records began, and we are spending around £1.3 million per year on clearance, which is diverting resources of our neighbourhood services teams from wider prevention activity and, of course, all the other work that residents value this council doing in keeping the borough clean, tidy and pleasant. And that's why we're taking the steps needed to double down on this unacceptable activity in the first instance. And this policy will be part and parcel of how we are cracking down on it. I say to the perpetrators, should any be listening, don't say you weren't warned. Not that you should need to be told, but action is not just being taken, but it's going to be consistently taken. Now, the updated policy sets out a clear, consistent framework for enforcement across all council services while allowing flexibility for case-by-case decisions. Matters related to Crawley Homes, however, where we are taking action in our role as landlord, are out of the scope for this policy due to the robust existing policies that have been updated in line with the expectations that have been set out by the social housing regulator. The policy is built on 7 core principles: accountability, proportionality, consistency, transparency, objectivity and equality, targeting and reasonableness. There will be a graduated approach that will be judged on the severity of the breach. More about this can be read in detail in the appendix to the report. And appropriate ways potentially to deal with cases, Cabinet will include the council issuing fixed penalty notices and civil penalties, statutory notices and works in default, community protection warnings and notices for antisocial behaviour, licence suspension or revocation, the seizure of property, simple cautions, forfeiture, injunctions, closure orders and prosecutions, plus for the really serious cases, proceeds of Crime Act powers and criminal behaviour orders. Following the introduction of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act in 2014, vulnerability must be a central consideration when using this legislation. As such, this revised policy introduces a protocol where officers must assess vulnerability, share information across departments, and consider alternative interventions to avoid unnecessary harm while maintaining compliance. To reassure the Cabinet, this does not mean that those who experience vulnerability are exempted from enforcement, and indeed, for some, the framework which enforcement provides to effect behaviour change can provide substantial benefits when delivered in the right way. Now, I know from being out in different parts of the borough, it is frequently areas with pockets of deprivation who have some of the most vulnerable residents who seem to suffer from the worst examples of criminal and antisocial behaviour. So to conclude this introduction, therefore, I would encourage the Cabinet to support the recommendation and help move forward this policy and the work that it will underpin both now and in the future. Councillors Khan and Hilton, before I pass this over to Councillor Crowe for comment and then open this up to the rest of the Cabinet, would you like to say something at this stage? And then I will go over to Councillor Sue Mullins for a second. But would you like, Councillor Hilton? Thank you.
I very much welcome this policy. It gives us a good framework in which we can really look at enforcement and regulatory issues we've got. It's not that we're not doing it already. I can tell you from my experience from neighbourhood service and the community wardens, they do pick up and they do deal with fixed penalties notice at the moment. But what this will do is for the community wardens to perhaps focus on some of the most difficult cases, prioritise some of their work, while at the same time this will act as a grey carrot and stick. You know, as you said, Chair, in your introduction, 1.3 million we estimate is costing us in terms of fly tip and littering. And luckily enough, we've got a great neighbourhood services teams who go through the borough, who are flexible and responsive, and take it on and pick up and clear up. But that's not enough. You need that carrot and you need that stick. And what this gives us is two things. It gives us a framework and it gives us transparency. So people can exactly expect to hear from us if they conduct this antisocial behaviour. And it's not only littering and fly tipping, it's dog mess. And we've got a really good we got a really good record on dog mess and clearing up dog mess. We've got 500 dog bins, but if you still don't put your dog mess in the bins, which I've seen before in parts of my ward, for instance, you need to be accountable for it. So in terms of the 4 principles, engage, explain, encourage and enforce, I'd really thoroughly welcome this. And also, probably the most important thing, it's really good, this framework, before we go live, in terms of vulnerabilities and knowing where the boundaries are. So people who perhaps either don't quite know what who've got equality issues, and people know where they stand. We use it as a deterrent, but we will also use it for people, not necessarily who drop, because I believe there's certain legislation where if you just drop it by mistake, for instance, you won't be picked up. But is that correct? Or am I? There's certain criteria about what counts as littering. So I think we just need perhaps Georgina to clarify
clarification.
But I do think this is the way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Before I ask Georgina to clarify, just want to welcome Councillor Sue Mullins to the room. Sue, you get the chance to advise us whether you have any declarations of interest to make.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry I'm late. No, I have no interest to declare.
Thank you very much. As Councillor Khan has indicated she's happy at the moment, I will move on to Councillor Crowe, I believe is... Georgina, would you like to clarify, and then we'll let Councillor Crowe come in, because he might have something he wants to say based on what you say, but let's see.
Hello, good evening. So if I think I heard correctly, so we will be issuing fixed penalty notices for littering offences as outlined and within the framework. We do use the 4Es approach that you just kind of described, but I think it is important to say that littering is an offence. So I think what's really important is that before we commence with particularly the third-party enforcement contract, that we do quite a lot of public awareness and communications, so that members of the public know that this will be an area of focus and activity, and can be aware of that before it's cited. But the 4Es that are actually in that particular framework apply to all forms of enforcement activity, but actually for littering, it is an absolute offence. So if people do drop that, they can expect to receive a fine for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. I have, I like to think I have quite a good memory, although I don't actually remember this coming around previously, although I was a member of the Cabinet at that time. I think it is right that policies are looked at timely intervals, and clearly something that is 12 years old is potentially quite dated, and there has been subsequent, obviously, legislation as well. So I think the Cabinet is absolutely right to look at this. Where I would be coming from is really from a position of, I want the council to have good powers that they can apply robustly for people who are committing particular offences, and I want it to be known by the public that the council have those powers and that they will apply them rigorously in some cases, but also appropriately and proportionately as well. The previous policy, reference in the report, but use terms like "we will." I suppose that's a statement of intent, and it could be argued potentially, that I'm not necessarily doing so myself, but it could be argued that the terms "we may" could potentially introduce some ambiguity into something. Having said that, I do fully accept and welcome that, I think Councillor Jones used the term professional judgment, that rules would not be necessarily applied dogmatically, but with judgment being used according to the circumstances that are there. My only potential concern is, and I think realistically it's very unlikely that people that go around dumping litter or whatever are likely to take the time to read our enforcement policy, but I do want staff to be protected when they are applying policies and applying fines, whereas it could potentially be suggested now that, you know, if, I don't know if someone's issuing a littering fine or fine for something that actually they say, well, actually, this is our policy, I have to do this. If the perpetrator then says, actually, yeah, like I said, you know, this is caveated with I'd be surprised if someone actually knew our policy, but I do want it to go out there, and you know, Georgina mentioned that there would be quite a bit of comms about this, which I would welcome, that we could not get into the position of what I might call arguing the toss, for want of a better phrase, about whether something is right or wrong, or whether actually something warrants issuing a fine or not. So it's having that. While I agree there needs to be some flexibility in some cases, and staff need to be able to use and apply their judgment, you know, appropriately and proportionately, that staff are also protected, that actually, you know, this is the policy, we do this, I am issuing this fine, and you know, it's not it's not down to me personally, which, you know, potentially could get argued the toss by a member of the public who, you know, we find across the public sector that members of staff, sadly, in all sectors, not just public sector, but in shops as well, get abuse all the time, and people will argue the toss about things. So just really, if I can have assurances that our staff will be well armed and well prepared, but also have those protections that actually sort of where it is not sort of the onus is then put on them by a perpetrator, that they could have some flexibility, and it's somehow their fault, if you see what I mean. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Georgina, can I ask you to comment on that particular point?
Yes, of course. So I think one of the things that's really important about this particular policy is it's an overarching policy. And I think it's just important to remember that perhaps some of the examples you were giving there were service-specific policies and further guidance for those staff members. So whilst these are overarching principles, actually in terms of different enforcement practices and staff carrying that out, that would always be according to the service-specific policies. And that's one of the recommendations in the report as well, is that actually, should this be approved, then actually it's for each of those services to link directly to this and perhaps do a refresh of that, so that their staff absolutely know the parameters, know sort of like in their particular service areas what can and can't be achieved. But also, I think it also mentions, well, it does mention in the covering report, about doing training as well for staff, so that they feel confident and competent and in exercising those powers. And obviously staff safety is always of utmost importance, so perhaps doing a refresh of that just to check in with staff, so that they do feel comfortable with that. But hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Georgina. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. I saw Councillor Irvine. Is there anyone else? Okay, thank you. Councillor Irvine.
It's now. There's no doubt that fly tipping is a horrible blight. So is littering, and unfortunately that they are quite difficult to deal with, because it seems to be so easy for someone to go out in the middle of the night and dump their unwanted junk in the nearest woodland, and you know, no one can see it happening. What I do notice is that quite often people seem to leave rubbish or household stuff neatly piled up by a dog bin, or they leave it on the side of the road, you know, all nicely piled up for the council to kindly come along and pick it up when it's convenient. And to me, I mean, those people might think they're doing the right thing. To me, that's still fly tipping. So I wonder if in cases like that, whether residents would still be liable for enforcement action. And if so, if we ought to maybe let people know exactly what fly tipping is, although I can't imagine really people don't understand it properly. But yeah, I'd like to hear the opinion on that, whether or not it would be actionable fly tipping.
Would you like to come back, Georgina?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a really good point actually that's been made there, and just with a couple of examples that were given, so leaving rubbish by a dog bin or on the side of the road, absolutely that would be classed as fly tipping. So then we would be investigating that for evidence in order to establish where it's come from. So yes, I mean the answer to that is yes. Residents who undertake that and who fly tip in that way would be liable for enforcement. And the point about communications is kind of like links back to the earlier point, but also I think operationally, just from talking within the service, which is neighbourhood services, who have to go out and actually pick most of this fly tipping up, is that we are increasingly getting more reports in from local residents actually telling us about what's happening, because they're so concerned about that, and we can follow that up then for investigation and enforcement purposes.
Thank you, Georgina. I have, unless Councillor Owen wants to come back. No, thank you. Thank you. Then I'll move on to, I saw Councillor Chris Mullins next.
Thank you. I'm sort of wanting to follow on a little bit from Councillor Crowe, because whilst obviously we welcome an updating of this policy, an operational policy, it's very important that that the staff are properly trained, properly protected, and perhaps these days with protective clothing. I do worry. I was just looking at the page 34 where it's about seizing property, and our society these days can be quite violent and reactive, and I just worry that if they're going to do some seizure like that, would they involve the police and take the police along with them, or I know, I accept we've got the authority to do it, but it's the vulnerability and the nature of the staff. I mean, policemen generally are very, very highly trained in dealing with violent people. I wonder if our staff are trained to that level and would be vulnerable in those circumstances. So, I mean, I can imagine sometimes bad reactions if you went to try and see something of people who didn't want to lose an item or whatever it was. So it's an area of concern. It's about staff training, protective clothing, and obviously I think the age group of the staff might come into it as well. You couldn't have somebody too old doing that job, I wouldn't have thought, if they were dealing with young men or something like that. I just, there's a general worry there about how that operates.
I'm not sure that, age is that much of a factor, Councillor Mullins, but
I wouldn't like to do it at my age.
Okay, no, I suppose yes, but you're well into retirement. Okay, let's to put it nicely. A lot of operational points there, Georgina. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a fair and right question. Are staff properly trained? As I previously explained, if this policy is adopted, then we will be going back out and doing a refresh of staff trained. But I think if we're talking about general enforcement, sort of like depending upon the risk and the severity of the enforcement warrants who's involved with that. And I think if you're talking about higher risk enforcement, so the example you gave was seizure of property, then absolutely if we felt that from a risk assessment that actually it was required, we would be talking to policing colleagues and asking for their help in executing that type of activity. So I think one of the things that always underpins this is the information, the intelligence that we have. That's kind of like clearly set out in the policy in terms of determining the escalation and the proportionate response to that. So yeah, absolutely. If officers decide that actually based upon the information that it's too risky and actually they need that support, then they should ask and I hope they would ask for that support to make sure that they are safe. I think it's that point about continuous communication really, and that dynamic risk assessment, which enforcement officers are trained to do as part of their core duties.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you very much. I really welcome this report. I mean, I think it's very important for the town to have a robust policy and enforcement policy. But at the same time, I think we need to also consider, as you said, about working across departments, because quite often somebody who offends in one area quite often is the same person who offends in a different area as well. So having that inside knowledge and information can be very useful. Also, I think, as you said earlier, education, it's really important that our residents understand what the limits are, what you can and you can't do. And the example you gave about sticking a black bag next to a dog bin or a normal rubbish bin, regarding that as fly tipping, a lot of people wouldn't regard that as fly tipping. They think, oh, we've been polite and, considerate. We put it somewhere where it'll be found. But yesterday I was walking through the town centre. Somebody had left 2 big black sacks right next to one of our small bins, and obviously a dog or a fox had got into them, and it was strewn all over the pavement, and it doesn't take long in a bit of wind before it's all over the town. So I think highlighting that to people, saying, look, do this is what happens 20 minutes later, this is what's going to happen half an hour later, so that people understand. And I also think we need to start talking a lot more to our young people as well in our schools and our youth groups, so that they grow up into citizens who understand that this sort of behaviour is not acceptable in a polite society like Crawley, and that therefore we maybe won't encounter quite so much of it later on in the future. But well done to everything that we're doing in this line, because I think it pays, at the end of the day, we all want to live in a clean, tidy and hygienic environment. And yesterday, looking at drink cups and fast food stuff laying all over the pavement didn't make you feel very proud of Crawley. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everyone's... Oh, Councillor Noyce.
Yeah, just a quick one. It would be good if we could accompany this with a mass publicity campaign explaining what it is, all the different circumstances, to reach as many people as possible, and hopefully that will negate some of this. And in fact, whatever the publicity costs us, we'll save that in our own expenses as well. But just to make everybody totally aware, so there's no excuse, and perhaps that will be a good situation.
Councillor Hilton?
Is it going to be covered in? I thought it was going to be covered in the next issue of Crawley Live. Is that right? Or is there? We've got a special environmental edition, so possibly not.
Georgina?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm obviously in contact with the communications manager here. It's about encompassing, I think, everything that's been shared here, and also from Councillor Sue Mullins about young people as well, and kind of like getting that messaging out at the earliest opportunity, as well as that wider public. So any and all channels is probably, we're looking for sort of like a maximum reach and impact on this.
Totally agree. Absolutely anywhere, including posters and walls, etc., etc. And hopefully that will reduce the instances by the people who are fairly sensible, and then the enforcement officers can concentrate on some of the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyce. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. What Councillor Noyce just mentioned, yes, definitely we should work on the comms, and once we've got something in writing, then all of us councillors, we can put on our pages, we can, so there's no excuse, we can put on all the residents' pages, we can get the information out to the residents what fly tipping is. And recently at my briefing, I think I was really pleased to hear that we had some out of town people come into our town and did some fly tipping, and yes, they were caught and they were fined, and I won't mention how much, but it was good. About young people, I think if we can take into note about junior citizen, I think that's coming up soon, so we can mention this in the junior citizens when we are dealing with year 6, I think, year 6 children, so we can mention fly tipping and give them a bit of information as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. So thank you. I think everyone's now spoken. Thank you, Cabinet. I do absolutely agree we need to recognise the work that's already been done by our community protection team and the neighbourhood services team, go above and beyond with clearing up what inconsiderate people are leaving. All I will say is that many more of such these inconsiderate people are likely to be in for a nasty shock if they continue their behaviour going forwards. Everyone will be treated fairly but firmly where that's necessary, and there will be a policy that they can point to confirm that it's been done that way. I mean, we as a council, we've recently increased the fines that can be applied since this government increased the rates we're allowed to set them, because residents told us it was what they wanted us to do in the consultation we had last year. And I think it is fair to say that councils have also run into problems in the past where they have tried to apply apply the rules too rigidly. What I would say with this policy is this gives not just the officers protection, indeed it gives the members of the public the protection that they can look to a policy and see that it was complied with. We will certainly pass on our request to Georgina and the community protection team that they might remind people what is unacceptable behaviour, although in many cases this is self-evident. I think it would also be quite beneficial if any of those successful prosecutions that might happen in the future, or indeed the one that Councillor Khan has referred to, the perpetrators might get appropriate publicity if that is suitable, because I don't want anyone getting convicted in private if they've done these sorts of things. So with that now done, I will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendation as set out in 2.1 on page 20 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Khan. Indeed. Is that agreed? Thank you, Cabinet. We then move on to item 10. Sorry, no, not item 10. Exempt information. We now reach the point of the meeting where members of the public and press will have to leave us because we have confidential business to discuss. So I propose that under section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraphs specified against the items. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Cabinet. The recording and live stream will now finish, and so I wish to thank anyone who is watching, and I wish them a peaceful and pleasant rest of the evening.